A troubled departure, the U.S. exit from Niger. This marked a significant shift in U.S. military strategy in West Africa, a region long plagued by instability and extremism. The decision to leave was not made lightly, and it came after months of intense deliberation and geopolitical maneuvering. The U.S. flag was lowered. This symbolic act signified the end of an era of American presence in Niger, a presence that had been a cornerstone of U.S. counter-terrorism efforts in the region. The last American troops boarded the transport plane. These soldiers had spent years working alongside local forces, training them, and providing crucial support in the fight against extremist groups. Airbase 201, once a hub of U.S. counterterrorism operations, fell silent. The base had been a strategic point for launching operations against terrorist groups in the Sahel region. The withdrawal, completed in August 2024, marked the end of an era. This timeline highlights the rapid sequence of events that led to the U.S. exit, a process that was both swift and fraught with challenges. It was a direct consequence of the July 2023 coup in Niger. The coup had destabilized the country, leading to a breakdown in relations with the U.S. and other Western allies. The junta's grip on power tightened. As the new regime consolidated its control, it became increasingly clear that the U.S. military presence was no longer tenable. Relations with the U.S. deteriorated, diplomatic efforts to resolve the situation were met with resistance, and the once strong partnership between the two nations began to unravel. The U.S. push for a return to civilian rule was rebuffed. The junta was determined to maintain its hold on power, despite international pressure and widespread protests. The expulsion of 1,100 U.S. personnel followed. This mass departure was a logistical challenge requiring careful coordination to ensure the safety of all involved. The withdrawal sent shockwaves through the region. Neighboring countries watched with concern as the U.S. pulled out, fearing the potential for increased instability and violence. It left a void in the fight against extremism. The U.S. had been a key player in efforts to combat terrorist groups in the Sahel, and its departure created a power vacuum that militants were quick to exploit. The Sahel, a vast and unforgiving landscape, was now even more vulnerable. The region's harsh environment and porous borders made it an ideal breeding ground for extremist groups. Concerns mounted about the fate of abandoned equipment and facilities. There were fears that these assets could be seized by hostile forces, further complicating the security situation. Would they fall into the wrong hands? The potential for advanced military equipment to be used by extremist groups was a major worry for both local and international stakeholders. The withdrawal also raised questions about U.S. commitment to Africa. For many, it was a troubling sign that the U.S. might be stepping back from its role as a global leader in the fight against terrorism. Was this a sign of disengagement? The move sparked debates about the future of U.S. foreign policy and its willingness to engage in long-term commitments abroad. A retreat from global leadership? As the sun set on the U.S. mission in Niger, the world watched closely, wondering what this meant for the future of international security and cooperation. A vacuum of power, the rise of extremists. The withdrawal from Niger had immediate consequences. Extremist groups, sensing an opportunity, stepped up their attacks. Violence escalated. The fragile security situation deteriorated further. The Sahel, already grappling with poverty, climate change, and ethnic tensions, faced a new wave of instability. The withdrawal also emboldened other anti-Western actors. They saw it as a sign of weakness, a victory against a global superpower. The narrative of Western imperialism was revived. Anti-U.S. sentiment grew. This created fertile ground for propaganda and recruitment by extremist groups. The vacuum left by the U.S. was quickly filled, not by stability and democracy but by chaos and fear. Shifting sands, the U.S. seeks new allies. The U.S. faced a dilemma. Its presence in Niger was gone. But the threat of extremism remained. A new strategy was needed, one that acknowledged the shifting realities on the ground. The U.S. turned its attention to the coast, to countries seen as more stable and receptive, countries like Benin and Côte d'Ivoire. These coastal nations offered a different proposition. They were less affected by the Sahel's instability. They had functioning governments, stronger economies, and a desire for closer ties with the West. They were also eager to counter the growing influence of Russia and China in the region. The U.S. saw an opportunity to build partnerships based on shared interests and values. A coastline strategy. Benin and Côte d'Ivoire step in. These two West African nations have become pivotal players in the evolving U.S. military strategy in the region. Their geographical locations and willingness to cooperate have made them indispensable allies in the fight against terrorism and instability. Benin and Côte d'Ivoire became the cornerstones of the new U.S. strategy. High-level meetings between U.S. military officials and African leaders have solidified these partnerships, ensuring a collaborative approach to regional security. They offered access to strategic locations. These locations are crucial for monitoring and responding to threats across West Africa, providing a tactical advantage that was previously lacking. They were willing to host U.S. troops and cooperate on security matters. This cooperation extends beyond just hosting troops. It includes joint training exercises, intelligence sharing, and coordinated operations. Benin, in particular, emerged as a key partner. The country's military has shown a strong commitment to improving its capabilities through rigorous training and joint exercises with U.S. forces. It had a history of collaboration with the U.S. This long-standing relationship has built a foundation of trust and mutual respect, making it easier to implement new strategies and initiatives. It was also strategically located, providing access to the Sahel without the need to overfly Niger. This location is critical for monitoring extremist activities and ensuring rapid response capabilities. The U.S. began investing in infrastructure in Benin. Airstrips were refurbished, training facilities were expanded. These investments are designed to enhance operational efficiency and readiness. The aim was to create a network of bases that could support counter-terrorism operations. This network would allow for rapid deployment and sustained operations across the region. Côte d'Ivoire, with its more developed economy and infrastructure, offered a different set of advantages. Its robust infrastructure supports not only military operations, but also economic stability and growth. It became a hub for intelligence gathering and logistical support. The country's advanced facilities enable efficient coordination and execution of complex operations. The U.S. also increased its military aid to both countries, providing training, equipment, and financial assistance. This aid is crucial for building local capacities and ensuring long-term stability in the region. Section 5. The Chad Exception, a return to familiar ground. While the United States focused on coastal partners, it also maintained a limited presence in Chad. The country, a long-standing ally in the fight against extremism, had experienced its own coup in 2021. But the new government, facing a surge in rebel activity, requested U.S. assistance. The United States responded by sending a small contingent of special forces back to Chad. Their mission was to train and advise Chadian forces not to engage in direct combat. This outside-in approach allowed the United States to maintain a foothold in the Sahel without a large-scale deployment. It also demonstrated U.S. commitment to its allies, even in the face of political upheaval. Section 6. Obstacles in the path. Challenges to the new strategy. The new strategy was not without its challenges. Anti-West sentiment, fueled by Russian propaganda and historical grievances, remained high in parts of West Africa. The United States was accused of neo-colonialism, of meddling in African affairs. The perception of double standards, particularly in the aftermath of the January 6th Capitol riot, undermined U.S. credibility. The reliance on coastal partners also created logistical hurdles. Reaching the Sahel from the coast required overflight rights from countries like Niger, which were not always granted. This limited the U.S. ability to respond quickly to emerging threats. Moreover, the coastal states, while more stable than the Sahel, were not immune to instability themselves. Political turmoil or a change in government could jeopardize U.S. access. Section 7. The Wagner Threat, a growing shadow in the Sahel. As the United States grappled with its new strategy, another actor was expanding its influence in the Sahel, the Wagner Group. This Russian private military company, accused of human rights abuses and destabilizing activities, had gained a foothold in several African countries. It offered security services, often in exchange for mining concessions or political influence. Wagner's presence in the Sahel was particularly concerning. It exploited instability, offering its services to cash-strapped governments and rebel groups alike. Its brutal tactics, often targeting civilians, exacerbated existing conflicts. Wagner also acted as a proxy for the Kremlin, advancing Russian interests in the region. Its growing influence posed a direct challenge to U.S. interests and undermined efforts to promote democracy and good governance. Section 8. An uncertain future regional security hangs in the balance. The security situation in West Africa remained precarious. The U.S. withdrawal from Niger had created a vacuum that was quickly filled by extremist groups and foreign actors like the Wagner Group. The new U.S. strategy, while pragmatic, faced significant challenges. Anti-West sentiment, logistical hurdles, and the growing influence of Russia all threatened to undermine U.S. efforts. The U.S. faced a difficult choice: disengage from the region and risk further instability, or double down on its commitment, despite the risks and challenges. The decision had far-reaching implications, not just for West Africa but for U.S. foreign policy globally. It was a test of U.S. resolve, its ability to adapt to a changing world, and its commitment to promoting stability and security in a volatile region. Section 9. The Long Game. America's evolving role in Africa. The U.S. withdrawal from Niger and its subsequent strategic shift marked a turning point in U.S.-Africa relations. This move was not just a tactical retreat but a significant rethinking of how America engages with the continent. For decades, the U.S. had relied heavily on military presence to exert influence and counter threats. However, the evolving geopolitical landscape demanded a more sophisticated strategy. It highlighted the limits of military intervention and the need for a more nuanced approach. The traditional methods of deploying troops and establishing bases were proving insufficient in addressing the complex challenges faced by African nations. The U.S. had to reconsider its role and find new ways to contribute to stability and growth. The U.S. could no longer rely on large-scale deployments or unilateral action. Instead, it needed to foster stronger relationships with African countries built on mutual respect and shared goals. This shift required a deeper understanding of the local contexts and a commitment to long-term engagement. It had to embrace partnerships, diplomacy, and a long-term commitment to development and governance. Diplomatic efforts became crucial in building trust and cooperation. The U.S. started to focus on supporting African-led initiatives and working alongside international organizations to address regional issues. The U.S. had to demonstrate that it was not just interested in counterterrorism, but in supporting African solutions to African problems. This meant providing resources and expertise to help African nations build their own capacities. Training programs, joint exercises, and advisory roles became more prominent in the U.S. strategy. This meant investing in education, healthcare, and economic development. By addressing the root causes of instability, such as poverty and lack of opportunities, the U.S. aimed to create a more stable and prosperous environment. Initiatives in education and healthcare were seen as foundational to long-term peace and development. It meant promoting good governance, human rights, and the rule of law. The U.S. recognized that sustainable development could only be achieved through transparent and accountable governance. Efforts were made to support judicial reforms, anti-corruption measures, and the protection of human rights. It meant listening to African voices and working collaboratively to address the root causes of instability. Engaging with local communities and leaders was essential in crafting solutions that were relevant and effective. The U.S. aimed to be a partner that listened and responded to the needs and aspirations of African people. The U.S. had an opportunity to redefine its role in Africa, not as a hegemon, but as a partner, a supporter, and a friend. This new approach was about building a future together, where both the U.S. and African nations could thrive. It was a chance to create a legacy of cooperation, respect, and shared progress.